Hello and welcome back to KubeCon CloudNativeCon EU, live from Amsterdam, where actually the sun is breaking out through the clouds a little bit, which is great. I think that the sun is shining on this community today. I'm joined by Paul Nashawaty, back here again, talking about how things are coming to the edge and how things are really progressing. And AI, of course, is in everything, but this is going to be a great conversation.
Absolutely, I mean, from edge development and creation and an explosion of applications at the edge and AI, have to say that too, but yeah, absolutely looking forward to it.
Absolutely, and so excited to have Lena Hall, who's the Senior Director of Developers and AI Engineering at Akamai, and somebody who's no stranger to being over here, Matt Butcher, who's the VP of Product Management at Akamai this time. So welcome on board.
Thank you.
Fantastic to be here.
Excited to be here.
So why don't we hit that? Last time you were here wasn't with Akamai, so kind of help us understand that.
A little bit's happened. A little bit's happened.
A little's been going on.
And as you remember from last time, I was the CEO of Fermyon. We were building the next generation of cloud computing powered by WebAssembly. We'd built this ultra-fast, lightweight, very powerful serverless functions platform. The journey we had along the way, and it was so cool because we could go back and watch theCUBE from years ago and see me trying to figure out sort of how we were going to build this thing. And we started out by trying to build our own cloud. We'd built this amazing runtime, but then we had to figure out sort of whose hands to put it into and what we as a startup could do. So we tried building our own cloud. We experienced a lot of success with developers on that platform, but then realized we needed to expand out, and we were not the right company to be able to build our own full cloud, right? And so we paused there and said, well, Kubernetes is a great ecosystem to run in. So we took our runtime and ported it over to Kubernetes and we're running it there. Again, very popular thing. We accomplished some really, really cool stuff with some great companies then. But somewhere around that time, Akamai approached us and said, have you considered, you got the fastest runtime in the world. We've got the most distributed network in the world. If you could run those things on our network, then we would be cutting down the speed of compute and the speed of networking, and you would have the fastest developer platform in the world. And so we joined forces with Akamai. I think the last time we all talked, we had just started our partnership with Akamai. Things just worked perfectly. And we were so excited about what we were able to accomplish that when Akamai approached us and said, if you were insiders instead of outsiders, you'd be able to build a cooler thing faster. And we went, okay. So in December of last year, Akamai acquired Fermyon. We officially kind of merged in January of this year. The team basically is still a unit inside of Akamai. We're actually growing. We'll be working on the edge workers and container platforms as well. So it's really, really exciting. Lena and I knew each other from Microsoft. And effectively, Akamai is saying, hey, we need to make a new approach to developers. And this new approach has Matt's part, which is building a platform. But we also have to figure out how to start telling this story to developers that Akamai maybe didn't alienate, but just didn't speak to very well in the past.
And I think this is huge for developer community, especially for Akamai, because traditionally Akamai has been known as a CDN, as a security company. And we have so much going on in compute, starting with the managed Kubernetes service. Serverless functions, they enable the lowest barrier to adoption for developers. Developers are lazy. They want the easiest thing to get started. You can use almost any language. It's super fast. The time from the beginning till when your function is running should be less than just a minute or two, right? So this experience really enables them to move fast. And what I like about this acquisition is that it kind of positions us as a company that serves to every layer of developers. So whether you're a hardcore distributed systems engineer or an AI engineer who wants to deploy inference on GPUs running in Kubernetes, or if you don't want to deal with any of that and just use Spin, are deeply embedded into open source ecosystem, you have a very easy on-ramp. And we're trying to build up the team that serves developers in the most efficient way and really build that community that's tight-knit and enables everybody to move fast.
Yeah, now Lena, Matt, this is forward thinking, right? Because when you look at it, we were doing some survey, we did some research, our research is showing that 500 to 1,000 AI web-based or AI production-based applications at the edge locations is what's expected over the next 2 years in growth. So it keeps it developers friendly. Now when we say developers these days, it's not the professional developer, it's the builders, it's the lines of business, it's all the people that are building things, right? And so Lena, I think that from that perspective, combining the cloud and the compute resources together at the edge locations, that really starts driving those lines of businesses for success.
Yeah, I think you're making a really good point. On one side, like the latency aspect, eliminating cold starts, but also putting the compute closer to the user, that really enables some of the most critical use cases. I was just at GTC last week in San Jose. There were, I think, more than 40 robots in the exhibition, but like robotics is one of the use cases where serverless compute enables so much. But what you said about kind of the definition of developer, it has evolved over the last couple of years that anyone can be a developer. My 5-year-old is a developer now, so we need to adjust kind of the technology to serve the people who want to build something but they may not have the same background. Everybody's using Cloud Code, Codex. We need to enable solutions that equip them for success, and I think this is one of the most amazing things we can do now.
When you look at it, I think one of the things about edge, and to your exact point, where it becomes physical is far edge from that perspective. And I was at GTC last week too, and man, what they got to get out of San Jose, that was crazy. That was like overdone. But when you start to look at the edge and things of that nature and trying to bring it out, for me it's ROI, return on inference. How do you bring that all the way to the consumer? Is that a lot of where your focus is from those developers who are thinking about, hey, I need to bring it to that consumer of that AI?
Yeah, I think the biggest advantage is speed to value. So in the development process, you can get a lot more efficiency when you don't have to deal with the underlying components of the infrastructure when we're handling all that. But also cost savings. I mean, when you run distributed inference yourself, you don't have to pay to a centralized data center. You have data locality. I think these are the elements that come in terms of ROI. I'm curious if you have more thoughts on that also.
Yeah, there's so much here because, to your point, Paul, we're seeing two interesting developer shifts happening right now, right? One of those is the one that we, in this kind of space, always love because there's a whole bunch of new greenfield development going on, which means there's an opportunity for us to speak a new way to a new set of developers who are probing again to find the right solution to run their AI-based applications. So you've got kind of seasoned developers who might have been sort of stuck in their ways before, but now are going, oh, we need a new set of tools, and we want them to be more focused on inferencing, and we want them to be more focused on using my code generation tools to do that. So we've got that group, and then we've got this other group of developers who were not developers 4 months ago. And I was listening to somebody talk, and she was telling me, I have no formal training in writing code. I got started by using Claude, built this little application, then I had to kind of understand how it worked, and now I'm just totally hooked on this. I've finally been able to automate some of our business processes that we've done manually for years. And that's a huge story, right? In both of those cases, Akamai has this chance to speak into these environments and say, hey, we can get you a really good developer experience. We can get you as close out to those users as you can because we can run it distributed along the edge and hundreds, thousands of different points of presence. And you don't have to learn about managing infrastructure if you don't want to. You don't have to learn about deploying into multiple regions. We just can handle much of this for you. And then as you develop more interests and more skills and other things, we can sort of upskill you into being able to run your own Kubernetes cluster. It's a huge possibility for us to make an outsized impact on this kind of nascent market. And it's really excited to be doing this together because it really takes both streams, right? You have to both build the technology and be listening very carefully to what these two new groups of developers are saying, but also you have to get really good at communicating with this group of developers, both of them, right? Because on one hand, you got some who have some accrued opinions and are trying to expand, and others are going, I'm excited about this. I want to get started. How do I go from blinking cursor to deployed application the fastest way I possibly can?
Yeah.
I also wanted to add, I think rarely when we talk about ROI, we talk about open source, because like functions do a lot with open source projects, like Spin is a CNCF project. A lot of innovation is happening here, and open source community is very active in moving the project along with a very fast speed. So you don't have to learn a whole new framework that is locked in. You can leverage existing technology that there's many contributors, and you can contribute back. I think that's a really great investment that also saves you time and efforts in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think both of you have touched on this, and it's you have a strategic kind of differentiation in the market. There's definitely that. But we're in Europe, right? And it's probably appropriate to bring up data sovereignty, it's appropriate to bring up governance, regulations, and compliance. That is one of the areas I think that Akamai and the acceleration of developers is really excelling, right? Because now you have that sovereignty piece. Can you touch a little bit on that? Because I think that's an area that is really where you shine.
And definitely an area that is not being made simpler by AI yet, right? We're processing far more personal data than we ever have before. People will type all kinds of things into an AI prompt that, without really thinking about, what country is this going to? Who is allowed to access this? And one of the things we've been really excited about at Akamai is the fact that by pushing things out to the edge and then being able to say, this particular segment of edge data never crosses out of here, this particular segment never crosses out of here, right? And we can start to carve up that edge and be able to improve data sovereignty. It's a long process, right? In part because it's the inverse of what we were doing for so long, right? For a while it was like, how do we get this everywhere? And now we're going, okay, now, how do we keep this in this one little slice here and this in this one slice here? But in the functions team, we've been talking about region sets where we can say, for this processing, it will only happen in this region. So only these 30 different instances are allowed to handle this kind of data, and it's never allowed to go out into these other regions. That, I think, is the kind of thing that an edge can do for you that a traditional cloud, you have to do all of that manually, right? You're spinning up your entire data center in this particular, or you're spinning up your entire infrastructure in this particular region, and then you're managing all of that. With something like an edge-based alternative, if you got the primitives there that say we're just keeping it in these segments, then all you have to do is say, I just want to make sure this never leaves Germany, right? I just want to make sure. I still think there's a lot to do as the laws are sort of still evolving. We're trying to look very carefully at them and say, what do we need to do in order to make sure that we're satisfying the desires of all these organizations today? But I think we're off to a really strong start.
So again, you talked about having been at GTC last week. It was not only out at the edge, but there was a lot of talk about the NV72s and these like 12 racks of Vera Rubins and stuff like that I think they're shipping like 12 of them a month or something at this point. But that may be the real work of getting models built, but where the real work of developers and what they're doing is really more out at the edge or out in smaller compute. Are you seeing that as people look at how they bring their teams along from that, is to start to think about, hey, great that you built it here, but it's got to run where the customers are and things of that nature? Yeah,
I am definitely seeing, especially after GTC and talking to so many people there, that many teams by default just start with a centralized approach because it's just how everybody approaches it, until they run into the bottlenecks, until they see that, okay, the turnaround time, round trip between the customer and the response that they're supposed to be getting isn't cutting it. We're getting churn in the retail customers, we're getting the delay in our robotics setup. So I think when they feel the pain, they start looking into other solutions. And this is where smaller models come in. Yeah. So I think the advantage of, we have a centralized setup where you can run a large, huge reasoning model, one of the best models that exist, in the market. But you can also deploy smaller, like 8 or 7 billion parameter model. Works great with all the versions of Nemotron, the famous, GTC NVIDIA model. So I see that people experience the challenge on their own, and they see that, okay, we need to find an option that runs in every region where the customers are, and we need a platform that can support the smooth experience with deploying open models, so we can quantize them, manage them, establish like the right caching strategy, like the data locality goes exactly in the same place. So people are slowly realizing that smaller models are great, very tailored for custom use cases. You can fine tune them, but first they have to understand that, okay, we have to get to the latency that we are promising to our customers.
And one of the demos that we showed at GTC last week was an AI orchestrator that basically routed to the appropriate model. And one of the fascinating pieces of that was that in one case, during the demo, this big map that's showing where all the GPUs are running and where the models are loaded, and they're in California. At one point, it shows that it's faster to go to Paris, to the Paris data center, because this giant model is already loaded in Paris, and it's faster to go there, do the computation, and come back than to load that model locally in San Jose, which was a data center probably down the block from where GTC was. But that showed a very interesting way of carving up like what can be done with an edge that can't be done in a traditional cloud. Because there we were saying, we've got these things spread out all over, and we have the knowledge to know, or we have the knowledge to determine how to execute optimally, and we can do that. So that was a really fun thing, and I agree with Lena, like a lot of the inferencing stuff, we're finding that we can build these stories where small models are deployed very pragmatically to be able to do that lightweight work faster and closer to the user. Sometimes the big models have to get directed to some of the bigger data centers with more readily available GPUs. It's that part is a new world, and we're starting to look at it less as like a centralized inferencing factory and everything else is attaching to that, and more as like a network of GPU resources with different models loaded in different places, and then it's just a matter of calculating which path through that network you want to go in order to do inferencing in the right way.
Yeah, I think that is exactly what the whole agentic model is supposed to be about as well.
Yeah, exactly,
so,
exactly.
No, but I think this is a great place to leave it. Thank you, Lena and Matt. You're now a veteran of being on, so thank you. And Matt, thanks for coming back. And
thank you for having me.
Paul, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching this episode of theCUBE, live from KubeCon CloudNativeCon EU. We'll be back with plenty more this afternoon.